So I thought I'm a guy with depression, but it turns out I'm a guy with depression and with this sort of flip side of it. And cyclothymia it's sort of like a watered down bipolar. So if you think about the extremes of bipolar as being hypermania, so staying up all night, being awake for days, not wanting to sleep. I mean, there's lots of symptoms to it, but it's sort of manic, often risky, a sort of slightly obsessed behavior around doing things that feel fun. And in that state, you feel like, I guess, the happiest a person can feel, or the most up a person can feel. Like, think of your best day when you look at yourself in the mirror and you think, oh, I look great today and I'm really successful. I've got loads of great ideas. It's that energy. And then for a manic depressive, someone with bipolar, the other end of the scale is very deep depression, like I described that my dad had. And so with cyclothymia, it's those same bookends, but the threshold it has moved in. So the mania is never as manic as someone with bipolar, and the depression is never as deep as someone with bipolar, but you're sort of touching the sides of it. And so for me, it manifested as something, this energy where I thought, I'm just a really productive guy. And often people would say, how are you doing all this stuff? You've made so many things in the last month. My agent would be like, can we get this thing? I know it's going to take you probably a month to get it, like a pitch or something for a TV show. And the next day I'd have it. And it was this sort of energy that I would fall into where you'd get, it's so hard to describe, but you'd get days or weeks worth of stuff done in hours because you were just locked into it. And if you ever came back to it, and I find it all the time, if I ever come back to something that I worked on at a time when I was in a sort of up cyclothymic stage, I've got no idea what it is. I don't know how to undo it. Sometimes I've had to go and tweak things in presentations or make alterations to some of the board games I've made, or even with the song stuff, going and change stuff. And it's like it was made by somebody else.
Wow.
And so I realized I had this sort of, it wasn't that I was just depressed. I had this sort of dual thing going on. And the minute someone put a label on it, it changed my life, because I was able to understand, I'm not just depressed. This is a thing that's going to come in a wave. And maybe I can, if I don't fall into the up as much as I have done, and that's a really hard thing to do because it's like someone opening the gates to Disneyland and saying, run free. But if I can stop myself from doing that, and I can kind of try and control that flow state a bit and not let it control me, brilliant. But also, now that I know it's the sort of the other side of the same coin with the depression, I can kind of trick myself out of falling into a depression by using some of the things that I would do in the up stages. And since getting just the word cyclothymia and knowing what it was, I've been able to just clock myself and go, I have that feeling that I really want to drop everything else in my life and go and work on God knows what. Maybe I should give it a couple of days. I know that's hard. It feels horrible to do, but maybe I should just not fall into it. And if I'm still as excited by the idea in 2 days' time, then I can approach it and I can control the flow rather than it control me. And then similarly with if I start to feel low, I can say to myself, okay, what can I do that's going to take my brain out of the obsessive, spiraling, anxious, depressed, what's the word? When you catastrophizing sort of state of mind, and maybe switch my energy into something that has the illusion of productivity. And that's where the music came in. So I obviously play songs on the radio all the time, but my engagement with music was really passive. And we'd had a piano in our house as a kid, and I'd never touched it, didn't touch it once. And I really thought, why would I do that? What am I going to get out of that? I can't sing. I can't, I have no interest in learning it. And then for the radio, I had this very transformative experience where I got to go to a recording studio for a day to make a silly song. And I guess, as I've just described, that I've spent my whole life, or like my favorite energy really is, I've got an idea, can I get it out into the world? It's almost part of, I think, the condition. It's like, if you think it, I have to almost like expunge it from my body somehow. And we went into this recording studio, and a producer there played a note that I just hummed a bit out of tune into a keyboard. And it was like the thought had directly been downloaded from my brain. And I liked that feeling. I thought, that's amazing that this thing I've just thought it, and now it's there, it exists in this computer. And then we did it with another note, and he did it again. And I thought, oh my God, I have to learn how to do this. It was so immediate in that moment where I thought, I don't know where to begin, but I have to learn how to do that. And so I did. I sort of dabbled with it on and off, played on GarageBand on my phone and didn't know anything at all. I never played an instrument and knew no music theory. I literally never done anything musical at all. And then lockdown happened, and I thought, right, this thing that I've been sort of tinkering with as a hobby, maybe I should try and write a song. And I said to myself, I'm going to try and do a song about anything in that first lockdown. So I bought some speakers, and I bought like a little keyboard that you plug into your computer despite not knowing how to play it. And I thought, I'm going to sit and write a song. And I sat down, and so I don't know music theory, but I know enough that I can play some chords in C major, which if you play piano is just all the white keys. It's really easy. So I played something on the white keys, and the computer's quite clever. It can turn it into different musical keys. So you can play something in C, but it can make it in F sharp or whatever. So I found a nice sort of a tonal place, and I played these 3 chords, and they were quite sad. And I was like, okay, and I just looped them over. I thought, I'm just going to write some lyrics to these. And at this point, I'd still not at any point thought about my dad. It wasn't like a thing I'm going to sit down and write it. And I had this little melody that popped into my head, which was the opening melody of that Your Car song. And I just wrote the words without thinking. I always hated the smell of your car. And I was like, that's such a weird thing to write. And then I thought, well, I sort of did with my dad, because certainly as a teenager, it was very difficult because we'd had this huge falling out, and I really did not want to be around him. But I was a child, and he was my dad, and so sometimes he would have to drive me to things that I would want to go to, and I had to be in the car with him. And I remember feeling at the time like, I know he's been drinking, hadn't clocked that he was an alcoholic, but I was like, I know he's had too much to drink, and I feel unsafe in the car, but I have no other option. I can't get to where I need to go without him. And so I felt very fragile in that space. And I thought, well, maybe that's the song. And I wrote it honestly in about 10 minutes. And I was in floods of tears. It was a very odd experience. I was just in this spare room of our house, crying my eyes out as I wrote this thing. And it came out of me incredibly quickly. And it was sort of everything that I wanted to say. And around maybe 6 months before that, I'd sought a therapist to go and talk about some of these feelings. And they were pushed down very low, to the point where I said to my therapist, she's like, any major life events? And I'd explained some things that had gone on, because I was feeling really, anxious and depressed. And I'd found out about the cyclothymia thing. And I thought maybe I should go and talk to someone about it all. And I said, well, my dad killed himself when I was 22, but that's fine. I'm fine with that. So, we don't need to go into it. And of course, anyone who's had therapy or is thinking about it, in an incredibly organic way, they'll ask you questions that bring those feelings to the surface. And I realized there was a lot to deal with. And she had suggested that maybe I write a letter to my dad explaining some of the feelings, or write it down somehow. And I kind of hadn't done it because it was still too painful. The idea of, even now, I think the idea of writing a letter to my dad, I would find incredibly hard, because it's such a swirling ball of very conflicting emotions. But there was something about putting it into this song where I hadn't decided that that's what I was going to do, and it just sort of happened. And then so I had these piano chords, and I had the song, and I phoned my friend Amy, who I'd sort of met a couple of years back, and I'd seen, she was a singer, and I'd seen her on Instagram, and I just loved her voice. And I said, look, I've written this thing. I don't think it's ever going to go anywhere or do anything, but would you record it? Because I can't sing. I was like, would you record it? And she just did the most amazing job at delivering it, and she gets something about this file, and I spent maybe a month figuring out how to make it into a thing that sounded listenable, because I'd never produced anything before. So, it's like the first time you've learned anything, it's like, thinking about driving a car for the first time, it's sort of the same thing as that. It's like sitting in a spaceship. You don't know what any of the buttons do, and it's kind of the same, but it's actually like a spaceship with music production, because there's so many things you could do. And so yeah, I just sort of worked on it with the view to never doing anything with it. Just like, it's a thing for me. It's going to keep me happy. It's going to keep me busy in lockdown, and it's going to give me this new skill. But my God, it was the most cathartic thing I've ever done, because I sort of listened to the song maybe 500 times in the space of a month, and yes, sort of figured out how to make a song. And then at the end of it, I didn't do anything with it. I didn't even play it to anyone, because it was too exposing. And then the anniversary, the 10-year anniversary of his, maybe it wasn't 10 year, maybe it was more than that, but it was the anniversary of his death was happening. And I thought, I've made this thing. And it was kind of duly exposing, because, I didn't know what I was doing with the music thing. And I guess that part of me that's quite anxious, worried, what are people going to think? Everyone's going to think this song's rubbish. You stay in your lane, Matt. What are you doing? And then the other part of it was, I don't know if I'm ready to share this thing with people that I've just not shared with anyone. And I spoke about it with my wife, and I had to go and talk to my mum about it, because obviously she's, incredibly involved in the story. I spoke to my sister, and it was a hard conversation with my mum, because I had to say, look, I've made this song about Dad, and it's not all that positive. And it's this sort of thing that we've never spoken about as a family. I think I'd like to talk about it. She was incredibly lovely and said, she listened to the song and she cried about it, and she was really sorry for all the things that had gone on. And I guess her role in it, of probably knowing what was going on and not doing anything about it, and herself being quite passive. And I sort of put it out into the world, and I put it, if you've ever done this, you put something out and then just turn your phone off. I was like, I don't want to know really for a day or two how this has landed, whether anyone's said anything about it. And I came back to it maybe 10 hours after I'd put it up there. I thought, what's going on? And in the interim, I'd had loads of messages from friends and people I'd known for years saying we had no idea, and we've listened to it. And amazingly, it was amazing how many people had been through a similar thing, where they had a parent who was either an alcoholic or who had taken their own life, or unfortunately both for a lot of people. And I just had thousands and thousands of messages from people in my DMs and in comments and things. And it was kind of one of the most amazing days I've ever had, really, because I just sat and read through all of these stories, which were kind of identical to mine, or a bit different, or sometimes even sadder. And people just saying things like they'd never been able to express to their partner what their childhood had been like, and they could play them this song and it made sense. Or even, parents who messaged me to say, I am an alcoholic and I've got a 5-year-old, and this song has been the impetus for me to change, because I don't want my kid to think of me like that. It was such a sort of mixture of just incredible stories. And I sort of never, I guess our jobs are trying to connect to audiences, right? That's what we do, whether it's being funny or saying, oh, here's a song that we love, or, whatever it might be, even if you're saying here's Friends, you still want people to like Friends because you like Friends. And it was the purest version of that. And I imagine that you have this a lot because of the work you do with the podcast. But it was an amazing thing to have such an honest conversation that I was so scared. I can't tell you how scared I was of putting it out into the world, and having people receive it with a hug and with this, I guess, the same energy that I was putting out there.